Whatever is sufficiently clear and evident should not be denied, even though there may be other things belonging to the same subject which cannot be comprehended. If an opinion is proposed that has either no arguments, or it may have equal arguments for and against it, we must remain in perfect suspense about it, until convincing evidence appear on one side. We should not be hasty to give our assent to arguments that are merely probable without reservation, especially if it is possible to obtain greater understanding and evidence on one side or the other. When we are presented with two contrary opinions, if one has some unknown or unanswerable difficulties attending to it, we must not reject it immediately until we examine whether the contrary opinion has unknowns or unanswerables in it as well. If any doctrine or teaching have very strong and sufficient light and evidence to demand our assent, we should not reject it just because there might be an objection or two against it which we are not able to answer. Where two extremes are proposed, either in matters of speculation or practice, and neither of them has certain and convincing evidence, it is generally the safest to take the middle way between the two extremes. Moderation is more likely to come near the truth than doubtful extremes. When two different propositions both have undeniable evidence, and they do not plainly appear inconsistent, we may believe both of them, even though we cannot at present see how they are reconciled. For example, we know that man has a free choice and will, and yet reason and Scripture assures us that God knows everything that we will do. We may not know the finer points of how these two propositions are reconciled, even though we know that both are true. In difficult matters, we should not assume that two things are utterly inconsistent, for there are many propositions which may appear inconsistent at first, and yet afterwards we find that they are consistent, and in time the explanation made plain and easy. We should not call difficulties utterly insolvable, or even certain objections unanswerable. Time, diligence, and study may give farther light. A sincere student of truth and knowledge will affirm or deny with much caution and modesty, unless he has thoroughly examined and found the evidence of every part of his assertion to be strong and plain. If we happen to have the chief arguments for any opinion refuted and shown to be incorrect, we should not immediately give up the opinion itself, because we may find the opinion supported by other arguments which we might not have known of before. Often in matters of doctrine there are a number of arguments in their favor, some weaker and some stronger. We should strive that our doctrine of faith be reinforced in our minds by the strongest of arguments and evidence, so that we are not swayed by holding merely on to weaker evidence. The truth of any proposition does not rest on the number of arguments which are brought to support it, but by the strength and the weight of the arguments. A building will firmly stand longer on 4 pillars of marble than on 10 of sand, or earth, or timber. In areas where certain evidence is not to be found or expected, having a considerable number of probable arguments carries a great weight with them, and sometimes this is called circumstantial evidence.